Welcome to Stress Mess, a stressless podcast where the chaos is real, the caffeine is strong, and swearing sometimes happens, and that's okay. I'm Samantha Elizabeth, health and wellness coach, chronic overthinker, and proud BFFs to stress itself. Here we're ditching perfection, embracing unfiltered real talk, and making mindset shifts that might just keep us from screaming into the void. Let's get messy. On this episode of Stress Mess, I'm joined by holistic transformation practitioner Cynthia Fluck. Cynthia and I talk about the patterns we find ourselves repeating, whether it's in our relationships, our stress, our health, or the stories we tell ourselves. We explore why these patterns can be so hard to break and what we can do to start creating healthier ones. So let's break those patterns. Hello, welcome to the podcast, Cynthia. It's so good to have you on the podcast, and I know we have lots to talk about. I'm just so excited about this. But let me go ahead and let you introduce yourself first, and then we'll just get right into the topic.
Sure. Well, I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me on. My name is Cynthia Fluck, and yes, my husband's very worth the name. So, I always get that out of the way because people are like snickering in the background going, is that really your last name? Anyway, I am a holistic transformation practitioner. So I combine energy healing and functional medicine to help women reverse chronic conditions that they've been dealing with for many times decades. Things that the conventional medical system tells them that they're fine or tries to put them on prescriptions for. And we get to the roots of it and help reverse their dynamics and address their symptoms from the true causes.
Wow, that is so much. And I know that a lot of women that are probably listening to this or watching it is probably identifying, with that quite a bit, with the chronic symptoms and not having them resolved. I think that is the reason why I created this podcast, is because I also have a chronic symptom too. And I do a lot of holistic healing, to be able to deal with that more so than taking medication. Because when I go to a doctor, they're just like, here's this medication. And mine is, a lot of people know this is why this is the Stress Mess podcast, because I have high cortisol. And part of having high cortisol, means that I feel like my body is filled with rage all the time, And so, with that, kind of symptom, I tend to do more holistic or natural ways to deal with it, because what they want me to do is go on anti-anxiety medication, which makes my body feel like it's on a roller coaster. They want to, we're looking at surgery eventually, to take it out, which would be wonderful. But we're not there yet. So yeah, I think that is absolutely wonderful that you're talking about holistic wellness. There is something that you brought up, though, that kind of stuck with me, and that is about changing patterns. And I know a lot of times when we deal with things that are long-term, it's hard for us to change patterns, to be able to deal with that. So talk about how can people change patterns within their lives?
Right. Well, it's an interesting question to talk about with patterns, because we can actually address this from a lot of different angles. I mean, we can talk about it spiritually, depending on what your belief systems are with reincarnation or what your spirit does between lives. We can talk about it from a neurological standpoint. We talk about it from a mental standpoint. There are so many different ways. And how I address patterns with people really kind of depends on the person themselves. Now, I believe spiritually that we do reincarnate. And, I was raised Catholic, so this was a very sacrilegious belief when I was growing up. And of course, you fear God and fear heaven and hell or whatever when you're going to die. I don't believe that anymore. I won't go into the depth of why, but what I've learned about ourselves is that we actually choose this lifetime. We choose, I believe that we live in a virtual reality, that everything that is around us is a co-construction of our consciousness, our combined consciousness,
Mm,
and that we actually attract into our lives the patterns that we have within us energetically.
mm.
And it's the strangest secret, or the law of attraction, if you've heard of those things. And there are energetic patterns and reasons for this, and there are also neurological wiring reasons for this.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm trying to keep this not too complicated.
it's okay.
um, anyway, going back to the spiritual aspect of it, right? So as we evolve as spiritual souls, because we are eternal beings of light, we are energetic beings having a physical experience. And every incarnation through this life teaches us to evolve more and more and to grow our spirit more and more in order to be able to graduate, if you will, to the next level. So as we go through life, there are certain lessons we have to learn. So, for instance, let's say we need to learn a lesson about forgiveness. So, if we need to learn a lesson about forgiveness, which many of us do, we're going to continuously have patterns in our lives that try and teach us forgiveness. People
Mm,
wronging us, things happening to us that we get angry about, right? And we're going to keep experiencing those things over and over and over again until we learn the lesson. And to learn that lesson means we have to go deeper within ourselves and address our shadows and
mm.
really start asking questions about what's going in and why these patterns are repeating, and then understanding the lessons we need to learn. When we finally learn that lesson, that pattern's going to break and we're going to move on from that.
Wow,
So that's
that's
one layer.
yeah, and I wanna kinda break some of those things down,
Yeah.
that I found interesting and maybe other people found interesting too. So, can we talk about reincarnation, a little bit and maybe your beliefs around that?
Yeah.
Because I know that, some people, probably wish on their enemies that, that their enemy would be reincarnated as like a slug or something like that or but let's talk about that because do you believe in like reincarnation as different animals or, another person?
I don't really know how it happens, but the way I've understood it is that we start out as souls incarnating as things like rocks or leaves or
Mm,
trees or things that are um, inanimate. Maybe have a soul, have a spirit, but are just kind of more observers. And then as we graduate through, we go through into human incarnations, not necessarily even on this planet, right? This planet again, and I can go into a scientific explanation of this, but this planet is actually nothing but vibration. It's nothing
yeah,
but vibration. So when we talk about this planet as Earth, it's really just a realm of vibration, kind of a dimension, if you will, of
mhm,
vibration. So anywhere in the universe, anywhere in the energetic reality is a place that we can reincarnate. So it doesn't even have to be as a human if we're as an intelligent being,
yeah.
right?
I definitely believe in, that we're all energy, and I know this is, something of a topic that, a lot of people don't necessarily believe, but when we're energy, and we die, we still live on as energy, just maybe
Mhm.
not in the physical body. And I know, like, so kind of brings up the, story of the paranormal and, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that could be possible, but it could be in other forms, because energy is all sorts of forms,
Yeah.
as we see and, in the physical world, or even feel too, like when somebody leaves a room, sometimes their energy stays behind. And so I think that those are the kind of things, that at least, I believe, in this. What do you think about that? Have you, I guess, like explored the paranormal or anything like that since we're
Oh,
on the
oh yeah.
subject of
I can sense I can sense when other beings are in the room. So I'm actually kind of a weird person because I'm actually very balanced, right brain, left brain. So I
Mhm.
have a lot of intuition, but I also love science. So for the people who grab onto science and the Newtonian physical world, let me explain this a little bit. Excuse me. So here's a question I love to ask. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around for thousands of miles to hear it, does it make a sound?
Hmm.
The,
I mean, I
sci-
would say yes, but just nobody's around to hear it,
the
so
scientific
nobody's gonna
answer is
catch
no, it
that.
doesn't make a sound.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and here's why. It makes a vibration. Makes a
Hmm.
vibration. And that vibration travels through air, through a medium. And when it hits a sensor, our ears, that
Mm.
sensor translates the vibration through the bones in our ears and through the hairs in our ears. And it translates into our brain and comes out as a sound. So the
Mm.
sound only happens in our brain.
Yeah.
There's no sound outside of our ears. The same thing is true for all of our senses. There is no color, light or dark outside of our brain. There's only vibration. There's no
Hmm.
scent outside of our nose in our brain. There's only vibration. There's no flavor until it hits our tongue.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no texture until it hits our skin. There's no
Yeah.
hot or cold. It's all vibration. It's
That
all
completely makes
vibration.
sense.
Yeah. So when you think about things in this context, they know that we can only sense with our traditional five senses about 0.01% of the known electromagnetic spectrum. 0.01%. That's almost nothing. And
Mm.
then of the, I think it was like 2 billion bits of information that are coming at us at any given time, we have something called the RAS, reticular activation system, in the back of our spine, in
Mhm.
our brainstem, that filters down all that information into about 40 bits of information that our brains can sense at any given time, that our brains can actually process at any
Mm.
given time.
Mhm.
So, by those statistics, we're literally blind to everything that's going on around us. We're blind. And the only things that we actually see and perceive are the things that we are dialed into energetically through our belief systems, through our makeup, through our energetic vibrations, through our upbringing, through our health. All of that stuff is what programs that sensor to focus in on certain bits of information.
Hmm.
So if we believe that we're stressed out all the time, if we believe that we're a victim, if we believe that we have scarcity in our life, we are going to constantly have information coming into our brains that validates those beliefs.
Mhm.
And that is, again, scientifically how patterns repeat in our life.
That,
Because
that
unless we
completely makes
change the frequency and change the dial to pick up different information, we're going to keep seeing the same things over and over again, the same
mhm.
patterns. And
That
then,
completely Oh, go ahead.
sorry, and then speaking to the paranormal activity, we don't just have our five traditional senses. Each chakra is another sensor
Yeah.
dialed into a different frequency. So our first chakra is dialed into survival and fear and security, right? Our second
Yep.
chakra is dialed into creativity or destructive energy. Our third chakra is dialed into willpower and personal truth, right? And so on. Our heart is dialed into gratitude and love and all that. That's why we can walk into a room and people are very angry. We don't even have to see anyone. We can say, whoa, this is not a safe place for me. And we do this and we cover up and protect
Mm.
ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very interesting because I did hear the other day we have 3 dimensions that we recognize now, but, somebody had said that we have 4 dimensions, the 4th dimension is time,
Mm-hmm.
and time, as we perceive it is linear, in our physical body, but, perhaps in the more spiritual world, it's not so linear.
It's not. Everything exists right here and now. There's no such thing as a past or future.
Mm.
There's only singularity. It's all right now. I know. It's mind blowing because our brains are not programmed. Our brains we are calibrated to see linear time, but linear time is does not exist.
Yeah. I'm just writing a process today and, putting step 1, and then arrow to, the, left and or the right, sorry. Arrow to the right and, the next one too. I mean, because that's a very linear process, for things. But And obviously it has to be that way, when we think about that, in our lives because that's how we perceive things.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. I'd like to talk a little bit more about beyond the spiritual, the breaking patterns. We talked about people with chronic conditions, and
Mhm.
with people with chronic conditions, I know that's really hard for them to deal with. I know that the pain doesn't necessarily go away if it's a painful chronic condition. Um, and they just learn to deal with it. They just live their life around it. So, how do you help somebody, with a chronic condition, whether it's painful or not? How do you help them with that to kind of break the pattern, or, rather not just repress it or just cope with it, but actually to embrace it of some sort?
I don't think anyone has to embrace a chronic condition.
Mm,
It's Our bodies are absolutely miraculous. Our bodies know how to heal themselves given the right tools and environment.
mm,
And going back to energy a little bit, everything is energy, right? As we explained, that not only are our emotions and our thoughts and our belief patterns and all that energy, but our physical bodies are actually energy too. And what's interesting is scientifically they've proven that the energetic body precedes the physical body. The physical body is a manifestation of our energetic bodies.
mm,
So, as an example, they did a study on women with um, uterine cancer,
mm.
and they measured their electromagnetic fields, and they had a study. One side of the study is women with uterine cancer, and the other group was a healthy group, and they looked at electromagnetic frequencies and measured those. And they
Yeah.
found that all the women with uterine cancer had the same electromagnetic frequencies. And in the control group that didn't have cancer, the women who had the electromagnetic frequencies of the cancer but didn't have the manifestation of it yet ended up developing uterine cancer.
Wow. That's a pretty
So
amazing.
it is. It's
Of
very
course,
amazing.
that's manifestation. I know that a lot of people talk about that in manifestation of thought, but then also, in the physical too. If you say, and this happens very often with people, is that they'll have, some symptoms and they're just like, well, I wonder what's wrong with me. So they'll look it up, on the internet. And of course, WebMD always says cancer, it's the first thing that, hey, it could be
I
cancer,
know.
and so all of a sudden you feel like, oh my gosh, until I go get checked out by a doctor to verify if I have
Yeah,
cancer or not, at that time, you feel like you do. So do
yeah.
you feel that, like, when people have that and they believe it so much that it actually happens?
It can. Yeah, it's called the nocebo effect. Right?
Mm,
We have the placebo effect. If someone believes something is going to help them, it will.
yeah,
The mind is incredibly powerful. If someone believes they're going to get sick enough, they will. In fact, I think that's a reason why people do get sick a lot is because they believe they're supposed to, because of a
mm,
genetic test or because of the way their mom and grandmother all manifested had the same sort of issue. I mean,
yeah,
it's a huge factor. It's not all of it, but it's a huge factor. Um, Going back to dealing with chronic issues, what a lot of women miss, what a lot of people miss when they're trying to help themselves with chronic issues, is they only address the physical aspects.
hmm,
They don't look at the energy underneath. They don't look at the belief systems. They don't look at the trapped emotions. They don't look at the way their energy is moving and connecting with the earth and grounding or not grounding. Right? They don't look at the alignment of their chakras. They don't look at any of that unseen stuff because it's just not accepted, right? It's kind of
yeah,
taboo in the
yeah,
conventional world, but it's kind of when you try and implement these esoteric procedures and surgeries and supplements and whatever else you're trying to do to help your chronic condition, it's
mhm,
really the tail wagging the dog, right? You're trying to change the outcome without actually training the dog to do what it's supposed to do. you
ooh,
know, you need to train the energy first, not underneath. And I've worked with people both who did and didn't want to work with the energy because some people came to me and like, oh, that's just the devil. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to change your mind. So, I
Yeah.
worked with them. I don't work with people who don't want to work with energy anymore because I've seen the difference. Someone who
Yeah.
works with their energy and is willing to go through that transformation on an energetic level, as well as work with the physicality of the energy,
Mhm.
will heal twice as fast or more than someone who doesn't work on the energy. And
Mm.
oftentimes the people who don't work on the energy won't heal at all. They might
Yeah.
just get a little bit better, but they don't, it doesn't really heal.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can see, when people spiral because, they have a flood of a hormone, they have a thought, and then they latch onto that, and then all of a sudden, they go in deeper and deeper and deeper, and it could be a vicious cycle, for them to
Mhm.
be able to exasperate, whatever feeling or thought or even, in pain too. I know that there's a lot of times, when you are in pain, and it might be a chronic pain, or, it might be something that's persistent, that people tend to latch onto that, and that just becomes kind of their whole world, at that time. And they might talk about it with people, and, it's valid. But I think that also that latching onto, and I know I had talked about this before in the podcast, but, the cortisol, flood, or
Mhm.
any hormone that your body floods into that your adrenals, flood into your body at any time, people can latch onto that. And so I think that, for me, that's one thing when cortisol floods my body, which happens often. I can latch onto it and I can go into a crazy loop, of stress, and then, keep going. And I
Yeah.
think it's the same thing with a lot of other people too. You could have testosterone flood your body all of a sudden, and you can latch onto that, and just keep going, with it and not let it go.
Yeah. Those type of physiological patterns and loops that you're talking about is it's 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 really difficult to think your way out of that, right? Because it's
Yeah.
really, those things are affecting your brain. And it goes
Hmm.
both ways, right? The energy affects your body, but your body affects your energy too.
Yep.
Sometimes there are things that we need to do to kind of give you a stepping stone away from that pattern for a little while, a little crutch to help
Hmm.
get you into a better place to be able to change.
Hmm.
But also, what you're talking about is really identity. This is
Mm.
why I'm very much against diagnoses. I don't think anyone should ever get diagnosed with anything. And the reason is because a diagnosis is nothing but a label for a set of symptoms. It doesn't tell you anything about what caused it, it doesn't tell you anything about how to fix it. It just says, oh my God, I've been experiencing all these symptoms for years and years and years. And finally, I have a name for it. Hallelujah. Like,
Yeah.
great. Well, now what? Now you get to go tell everybody and go to the support groups, and now it becomes who you are. And then the
Mm.
second it becomes your identity is the second it becomes 100 times harder to get over it,
Yeah.
because it is much more difficult to change your identity than it is to change a pattern
Mm.
and to change a personality trait or to change a habit.
Yeah.
Because once you start really identifying with something and you go and try and change that subconsciously, it literally feels like you're killing a part of yourself.
Mm. Well, I feel called out, just because this is all the Stress Mess podcast, and the OG Stress Mess. And, I think that, of course, this has become, part of it. But I think that I have, embraced it and kind of made it a superpower, more than, anything. But it's just the recognition of, that I don't look at it as a negative connotation, but I look at it as more of a, how can I help others too? Because I do understand that others, are going through this. So, not that I'm an authority, in how to manage this, but I certainly have learned ways, that I can manage this, because if
Mhm.
I don't, I don't know, it's just like,
It's tough,
the rage will take over my body. No,
tough
but
to navigate.
what's that?
It's definitely tough to navigate.
It is, and I think that, it like I said, if I let it take over, my life, then I certainly and I know a lot of people, look at me and the people that interact with me, they're like, "You're so happy all the time." And I'm just like, "Well, yeah, just because I push through, that." And it's anything too. I mean, I'm dyslexic. I have ADHD, but man, I am so organized and I am great at communications. And the only reason why is because I have taken those things, that those labels, that a teacher, that I went through the test, to find out that I was dyslexic. And, I went through the test to find out I'm ADHD. And so those are the kind of things that, like, when those labels were put on me, I was like, okay, well, those are things are not going to hold me back, which is why, I'm really great at communications, which is why I need to be highly organized. Because if I fully and why, I'm also like jokingly the OG stress mess, because those are things that I have said, okay, cool, but that's not me. I'm like, I'm not going to be disorganized and totally all over the place all the time. Sometimes I am, but and I'm not going to say that I can't talk or write, because that's the kind of dyslexia that I have. And I'm also going to say that I'm not going to be a happy person. I'm just going to walk around angry and not like people. So I think that those are the kind of things that yes, I recognize that those are things that I have the symptoms. What can I do to actually not manage those things, but rather have them walk alongside me and say, yes, I recognize you, but this is not me, like you're
Yeah, that's
just an
terrific.
accessory.
I mean, you've become empowered with all of it, which is
Yeah.
amazing, which, a lot of people don't do. A lot of people just sit back and become victimized by it.
Yeah.
And to your point, talking about the spiritual aspect of things, I truly believe that people that are meant to be healers go through some of the most challenging experiences in on all levels of life, whether it's physiologically or mentally or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's because we need that experience in order to be able to lift others up that can't necessarily do it on their own. But
Yeah.
you've had the strength to overcome and to empower yourself with the challenges you've faced. And now
Mhm.
you're perfectly positioned to be able to reach out your hand and say, "Hey, come with me. I can lift you up." I don't think you'll talk to any true healer that hasn't been through a period of massive darkness.
Definitely. I think that's why a lot of people become coaches is because they lived through something
Yeah,
and they don't want to see people struggle, through that. They want to help them struggle less.
yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like, let's talk about your practice and how did you get into that? Because you
Mm.
had to have lived, through something. And do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, we can talk about it. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, right? I'm an intuitive empath, so I was put into a family of with a narcissistic father, and my mother was empathic, but she was always under my dad's kind of thumb. So I mean, they loved each other. We had a loving family. I don't want to make it sound like it was abusive or anything, but it was definitely challenging
Mm.
um, growing up, and then of course I had to repeat the pattern of being challenged by narcissists. So I joined the military.
Wow.
I was a pilot. I was the first female pilot stationed in Japan for the U.S. Navy. So it was, Japan is 20 years behind the rest of the United States as far as chauvinism goes.
I
That
got
was those
you.
were my character building years.
Yes.
And during that time frame, I definitely had a lot of really deep depression. I was alone. No one wanted to support me. I had the most bigoted boss you could ever imagine. And I complained about him to my superiors, and they wouldn't believe me because he outranked me, and he was nice to everyone and stabbed them in the back behind their back. So it was hell. It was literally 3 years of hell. I almost threw myself over the side of the ship. I don't tell many people that, and I know I'm saying that on a public podcast, but yes, it was bad. It was really, really bad. So,
That's
and then, getting out of the military, I continued my patterns by going to work for corporate defense industry, where I was again surrounded by a bunch of chauvinist um, narcissists, which was, so it took me a while. It took me a while to learn
okay.
to set boundaries. Um,
I was
yeah,
gonna say, okay, so you keep running into that, and let's go
yeah.
back to the previous conversation. You keep running into that, is that a lesson you feel like that you had to learn, and have you learned that lesson? I
You
hate
know,
to ask.
I feel like I have a lot, but then every now and then it rears its ugly head again and it tests me. I definitely get
Mm,
tested, right?
yeah,
And sometimes I get complacent, and I get caught off guard, and I let my boundaries down, and I get burned again. I'm like, there's still more. There's still more shadow to dig in, right? There's always
yeah,
more. There's always more growth we can do. I don't think we ever really stop learning and we ever really stop growing, but I'm certainly at a much more evolved place than I was 10 years ago, for
yeah,
sure, for
yeah.
sure. So,
Well, definitely. I was speaking of patterns because I just had Mandy on my podcast recently, and I'll have to go back to that because we talked about patterns, relationship patterns, and I definitely had a relationship pattern. For some reason, controlling men, kept coming into my life. Probably borderline narcissistic, although Erica Weed and I had a conversation on the podcast, just as a throwback to those podcasts. But we talked about narcissism and clinical narcissism, versus like the label that we put on people, for narcissism. And I'm sure, like in your experiences, those are more than likely clinical narcissism because it sounds like it was a lot. But we did talk about patterns, and my pattern that I knew I had to break was controlling men. Because I had a very controlling first husband, and my second husband. And then definitely my last relationship was just mm, I repeated the same pattern, again.
yeah,
And I mean, that is something that a lot of people do is repeat patterns in relationships until they finally learn that lesson. Because I
yeah,
know she said, you're the picker, like you're the picker, you're the one that
yeah,
chose these men. And I'm like, I know, and I recognize that, which is why, I have been taking a lot of time to heal, a lot of time to really figure out what the heck, Samantha, like,
yeah. Well,
so,
there are actually physiological patterns to it too, as well. I
mm,
mean, especially for someone who deals with cortisol a lot. If we're and I dealt with this too. If your nervous system is primed for fight or flight, to be in the sympathetic nervous system state all the time, which is the fight or flight state.
mhm,
And this often starts out when we're in childhood. We're in some sort of unsafe environment. We're
mhm,
either, being threatened, or we don't have food, shelter, and clothing, or we're fighting with a bunch of siblings for attention from our parents, or whatever the case may be, right? Um, and we're primed for that nervous system state that kind of gets wired in us, and it becomes our comfortable chaos.
mm,
So if life gets too boring or dull or healthy in some cases, right, we
yeah,
subconsciously go and look for things to rile our nervous system again, and give us more of that chemical reaction of the cortisol and the epinephrine and the norepinephrine and all of the adrenaline that pumps through our body, because
mm,
that's our comfortable chaos. and
mm,
and I definitely had that issue too. And I finally got to a point where I was breaking down. I wasn't sleeping. I was falling apart. I was losing a lot of weight, right? And all of this stuff. And I realized it. And I forced myself to slow down and place boundaries. And it
mm,
kind of was part of the narcissistic thing and the cortisol thing.
yeah,
But I basically scheduled in my calendar 4 hours every week. I told everyone I just had appointments already, that I was meditating, I was going to the chiropractor, I was getting acupuncture, I was getting massages, whatever the case may be, right? 4 hours. And for 3 months, I felt so bored and so guilty that I was not working 24/7, right? And then after about 3 months, finally, finally my nervous system started to retrain into more of a rest and relaxed state instead
Mm.
of being in a cortisol state all the time. So,
Yeah.
it takes time to retrain those patterns, but it can be done.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of going through that right now, with the feeling like I need to, with every minute of my day, do something productive. And I recognize it, but I mean, it's not like obviously because I'm talking about it,
Mhm.
but I think that's, one thing is that I call it a little bit of a pendulum swinging. I have new clients. I've got lots of work to do. I've got, my own content and work to do, for my own business too. And so, right now it feels like I'm working 24/7. And sometimes it can become tiring, for people to do that. I recognize that. And I'm recognizing because I've swung the pendulum, so far one way, I need to figure out like where's the happy medium. But, unfortunately, this is what our bodies do to us is if we swing the pendulum in one way, it's gonna force us to swing it all the way back because
Mhm.
that usually comes out in if you're pushing yourself too hard, you're gonna get sick, and hopefully not like a, long-term, sickness, but you're probably gonna come down with a cold or something like that, because your immune system is weakened, at that time, or you're just going to become body and mind fatigued, that you're going to kind of shut down. And I do recognize that, in some cases that I feel like, I have to give, 100% and all that kind of stuff. But I do recognize too, because this is something I coach on with people is that every single day, your best doesn't look like 100% every day because you can't go at 100% every day.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
your 100%, that day might just be relaxing, maybe, a little bit, or maybe just taking the full day off, which is on my bingo board, for people that have seen my personal bingo board, is that take off one guilt-free day every single month. And, that means that I don't get on my, phone and do emails and, get on my computer and do some work and everything. That is something I have to allow myself, and that's part of my
Yeah.
management, of my cortisol.
Mhm. Right. Right. And those patterns, you'll hear the term a lot. I know what I need to do, but I can't get out of my own way. Right.
Mhm.
Like I know that I need to do this in order to get this result. But
Yeah.
every time I go to do it, I can't do it, or I cheat, or whatever the case. It's because
Yeah.
it's wired subconsciously. We've got to rewire things subconsciously, not just work on them consciously. So we
Yeah,
can know, we
definitely.
can be very smart about what we need to do, but it's just hard to get past it. So that gets into meditation or hypnosis or
Mhm.
prayer. If that's what you prayer is, just another form of meditation, right? So,
Right.
and meditation doesn't have to be the whole sitting with your legs crossed and ringing bells and saying all the time, right? Anything that makes you lose track of time is meditation. If you
Yeah.
like to cook for hours on end and it feels like 30 minutes, that's your meditation.
Mhm.
Gardening, painting, you know, petting your dog doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah.
But what it is getting yourself out of your own mind,
Mhm.
focusing on something other than what you're wired to focus on,
Mhm.
and allowing yourself to reset and get back into a state of gratitude and authenticity, the highest vibrations there are.
Yeah. So valid, so valid. And I think that a lot of people, can start to recognize a pattern, that they're getting into that when they start to like identify it and then name it and then, realize, okay, because it's in my conscious, right now. I'm consciously knowing that I'm trying to give 110%, as they say. But I'm trying to, give that right now. I'm recognizing it and I'm saying, okay, what can I pull back on? Perhaps, eliminate, from my to-do list, altogether because it's not maybe going towards my goal. But then also, what can I do to actually take some conscious, time off? And I know that when we build those type of habits, those healthy habits, within our lives, hopefully healthy habits, that it goes into our subconscious at that time, and then it becomes the norm for us.
Mhm.
And, hopefully it sticks, too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It
Wow.
takes time, but it's possible. It's possible
Yeah, definitely.
to
Well,
do it. And I think one other point is, I think your clients are so blessed to have you, to use that word, just because, going at something like this alone is so daunting. And
mm,
sometimes we don't even, aren't e- sometimes we're too close to the problem to see our own patterns.
yeah.
And we need someone outside of us to say, knock, knock, hey, let's shed some light on this, because you're too close to the problem. Even healers, like I have clients who are healers themselves,
Mhm.
just recognize that they can't heal themselves because they're too close to the problem, right?
Yeah.
So it's I think having support to go through it without necessarily a support group that's making you identify with whatever issue you're going through, but
Mhm.
someone who's not going to coddle you, but someone who's going to help pull you through. It's
Mm.
so important.
Yeah.
Just to have that hand to hold, to grab you, that you can trust in, to guide you down the right path, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure it
Mhm.
out yourself.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, because I think that your clients are lucky to have you too, because I'm gonna be honest, before this podcast recording, I was like, okay, I have to take a shower and then I have to do my hair and then I have to do my makeup and then I gotta get this presentation done, but then I've got to do this. And I'm like, okay, then I got to record the podcast. And then like coming in, I was kind of like, okay, computer down, microphone, all this kind of stuff. And then I get into it and I'm like, okay, podcast recording, and then I gotta say that this is almost like a session. Thank you for the free session, by the way. Um,
I could
but
talk about this stuff for ages. It's my passion. It's absolutely my passion.
yeah,
I,
absolutely. And like, I gotta say, like, this feels almost kind of like a session is to be able to kind of talk through these things. And I think that a lot of people can benefit from the work that you do and what you could do for them or with them, I should say. So how can people find you on the web? How can people contact you to work with you?
yeah. So my website is crescentholistic.com. So crescent like the moon, crescentholistic.com. And then I'm mostly on LinkedIn if anyone wants to message me or look at any of my stuff. So it's slash Cynthia Fluck, LinkedIn.com in Cynthia Fluck is my LinkedIn profile. So I'd love to connect with anybody. Um, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but I'm also setting up a group program right now that's kind of a back to basics program,
Mm,
just because I find that a lot of people I work with one-on-one, there's a lot of common threads, even though everyone is a unique individual and needs individual care and an individual plan. Like there's no one size fits all protocol. There are a
mm,
lot of really basic habits that people can start doing on their own to start moving the needle and get them baselined and
yeah.
ready to do deeper work. So I'm working on setting up a community for that with recorded video sessions that they can go through at a self pace on just getting back to basics and on self care and daily habits and in understanding that if we do nothing but live what's considered normal health, no, a normal lifestyle these days, we're
Mhm.
guaranteed to have at least one chronic condition by the time we're 40,
Oof.
because normal is not healthy anymore.
Yeah.
So it's teaching people how to be abnormally healthy, how to be a healthy rebel, right? How to not go with what all your friends are doing and just say, hey, I'm going to be great. Because
Mm,
I tell you what you do in your 20s is going to show up when you turn 40.
definitely. And I'm gonna say, like, even what you do in your teens too. Because
That's very true. In fact, even nowadays, what your childhood looks like will show
yes.
up. I mean, not
Oof.
just psychologically, but what
Yeah,
with your eating patterns and everything,
yeah,
you show up later on. But in,
definitely.
unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the wherewithal to understand that, and they just think, we think we're invincible in our 20s.
Yeah.
And, I just turned 50 and I just like,
Shush up. You did not.
I did. I just turned 50 in February. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you
So,
look like you're 30,
oh, thank
honestly.
you. Um, yeah, but I mean, it was like I'm probably healthier now than I was when I was 30. It's just because
Yeah,
I know
I
a lot more now.
same, definitely.
Um, right, but your body changes. It catches up with you. You write the checks when you're 20, you cash them when you start getting into your 40s.
Yeah,
So ladies, like, be careful what checks you're writing right now.
very
It's
true.
going to show up later, and then it's harder to reverse stuff than it is just to prevent it in the first place. But
Yeah.
you can still reverse.
Well,
Anyway, yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. And thank you so much for all your wisdom, too. I certainly will put all your contact information in the show notes so people can find you, be able to connect with you. And I'm really looking forward to this community that you're building. I want to hear more about it. Maybe have you back, when you have lessons learned
I
from
would
that,
love
because that'd
to.
be great.
I would love to. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and learning
Same.
about your journey and what you're doing for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Same, same. Well, thank you so much. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
rest of your
You
day.
too.